The Browns coaching drama, why nobody wants this job. You're short a starting quarterback. So what are you willing to sacrifice to bring in a top-tier coach who can supposedly rescue the Browns and unlock Shadur Sanders' potential? A first-round draft pick? Maybe multiple picks? What's your price? Look, I've got serious issues with trading away draft picks. Period. I need to hang on to those. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not an idiot. If Sean McVay wants to walk through that door, all these big names sound fantastic, but here's the thing. I don't feel like there's one specific person we absolutely have to land, or that the franchise is doomed if we miss out on a particular coach. Let's be real. Whoever they bring in will probably crash and burn anyway. Here's the hard truth. We're going to throw around all these impressive names, and someone will correctly predict who gets hired. They'll be right for about 5 seconds. Then, the moment that coach signs the contract, they'll be set up to fail. Why? Because the owner is living in fantasy land. Seriously, he is. Did you catch what he said yesterday? Do you honestly believe that guy is capable of making the right hire? The wildest part is, are we talking about Jimmy's comments? Yeah, we've got some of Jimmy's quotes coming up next. I'm just saying right now they can hire whoever they want, but the NFL coaching merry-go-round just got absolutely bonkers. What's brewing with the Cleveland Browns and Shadur Sanders is about to send shockwaves through the entire league. Behind closed doors, some of the biggest coaching names in football are being hit with one crucial question. Would you come to Cleveland to build up Shadur Sanders as your franchise quarterback? And here's where things get wild. The coaches who are flat out saying absolutely not might be shutting themselves out of opportunities. We're talking about elite coaching prospects who are willing to gamble with their entire careers rather than dive into the Browns' mess with Shedeur at the heart of it all. This isn't just football anymore. This is about power plays, control battles, and coaches making career-defining choices that could flip everything upside down. And when you hear what's actually being discussed in these coaching interviews, you'll get why some of these guys would rather take a year off than go near this situation with a 10-foot pole. Shadur's reaction. Browns, Shadur Sanders. What did that mean to you when you found out you're the starting quarterback for the rest of the season? Honestly, I was just locked in on the next game. That's cool and all, but I'm focused on being the best player, the best teammate, the best leader I can be for this team while I've got the chance. You know what I mean? I don't really look that far ahead. That doesn't give me any real security. The worst coaching gig in football. The Cleveland Browns have hands down the most toxic head coaching opening in the NFL, possibly in NFL history, for 3 major reasons. 1. The quarterback mess is absolutely brutal. Deshaun Watson's coming off yet another injury. You're on the hook for $46 million to him. So what's your play? Dillon Gabriel was your higher draft pick this past season, sitting on the bench behind Shadur Sanders, who most of the team wants starting. 2. It's one of the most historically messed up franchises in the league. Kevin Stefanski wanted Deshaun Watson so badly as his quarterback that he was willing to dump Baker Mayfield, who's now the franchise quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 3. You'll have to answer to GM Andrew Berry, who's now sweating bullets on the hot seat. The Cleveland Browns have scraped together only 8 wins over the last 2 seasons. It was obvious this year that Andrew Berry wanted Shadur Sanders, while Kevin Stefanski was pushing for Dillon Gabriel at quarterback. So now you walk in as the new head coach, and you might as well ship Dillon Gabriel to wherever Kevin Stefanski lands. Then you've got to decide whether you actually believe in Shadur Sanders as your starter. If you do, you build everything around him. What's really happening behind the scenes? Look, I need you to grasp what's actually going down right now in NFL front offices, because what we're witnessing isn't your typical coaching search. This is different. This is personal, and it all revolves around one name, Shadur Sanders. Jeremy Fowler dropped a bombshell yesterday on the This Is Football show. He said the Browns are doing preliminary digging for a potential coaching switch. That's ESPN speak for they're absolutely wheeling and dealing behind the scenes, but we can't say it straight out yet. Fowler lumped Cleveland and Las Vegas into the same bucket, teams that are 50-50 on whether they're ditching their current head coaches. But here's where the plot thickens. This morning, Fowler published a piece on ESPN.com floating Mike McDaniel's name as a possible candidate for Cleveland. If, and this is a huge if, both the Dolphins part ways with McDaniel and the Browns move on from Kevin Stefanski. On the surface, that sounds like your standard coaching carousel chatter, right? Team A fires their coach, Team B scoops him up, everybody moves forward. Except there's one massive wrinkle making this entire coaching hunt completely unlike anything we've witnessed before: Shadur Sanders. The non-negotiable condition. See what Fowler didn't spell out in his article, but what's being hashed out in every single coaching interview the Browns are holding is one deal-breaker condition. And that condition came out crystal clear in the conversation between analysts breaking down this story. One of them put it as plain as day. There's the catch of your keeping Shedeur as QB1. Let that marinate for a second. The Browns aren't just asking coaches, do you want this job? They're asking, do you want this job with Shadur Sanders as your starting quarterback, and can you mold him into a franchise guy? This is why I've been hammering on Brian Flores for months. The Browns need a no-nonsense, take-no-prisoners coach. Listen, we don't have the full picture. I don't know exactly what's brewing in the locker room, but the most crucial thing to me for the Browns is this. I don't care about snagging the most innovative play caller. I want to bring in a leader of men. Brian Flores has a reputation for being tough as nails. And you know what's happening? Some of these elite coaching prospects are saying, no way. They're walking away from millions of dollars, walking away from one of only 32 head coaching positions in the entire world because they don't want to deal with what comes attached to Shadur Sanders. It's not about talent. Now, before we dive deeper, let me make something crystal clear. The analysts talking about this weren't questioning Shedur's ability. They were talking about everything else: the perception, the circus, the media spotlight, the fact that his dad is Deion Sanders, all the stuff that has zero to do with whether the kid can actually play ball. One analyst said the Browns need a hard-ass coach and brought up Brian Flores. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, the Browns need a leader of men. I don't give a damn about hiring the flashiest play caller. I want to hire a leader of men. Then another analyst pushed back on Mike McDaniel, saying he's too much like Stefanski personality-wise. Not in terms of play-calling chops. McDaniel's offense hung 70 points on the Browns a couple years back, but in how he connects with players, handles the locker room, his whole vibe. And here's where it gets spicy. They started talking about today's NFL players being pampered and babied. One literally said, so many players today are so coddled. They're so babied. Don't you want to be coached hard? Don't you want to be pushed to reach your peak? Then he brought up Brian Flores and how Flores had the guts to challenge the entire NFL with his lawsuit. He said Flores put his whole career on the line to stand up for what's right. And that's the type of coach Cleveland needs. Someone with a backbone, someone who won't pamper players. You see where this is headed, right? They're spinning a narrative where Shadur Sanders embodies everything that's supposedly broken about modern football players. Too much spotlight, too much hype, too soft, needs to be toughened up by someone who won't coddle him. And coaches are picking up on this. They're hearing that if they grab the Cleveland job, they're not just inheriting a roster. They're inheriting a media three-ring circus centered around a 22-year-old quarterback who comes with baggage. Shedeur on his journey. My relationship with God has kept me going, kept me sane, kept me able to walk into a situation that probably nobody would want to be in, like being the fourth-string quarterback and doing all that stuff, and being able to wake up and go to work every day and just be grateful. Did you always know you were going to get your shot? That if you just kept grinding, you'd get an opportunity? I had no plans. The contradiction. But here's the part that's driving me crazy, where the whole thing crumbles. These same analysts saying the Browns need a tough, no BS coach who won't baby players spent the next 20 minutes debating whether they'd surrender draft picks to trade for Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan. Let me say that again. They want a drill sergeant who will be hard on Shedeur and won't coddle him, but they also want to fork over multiple first-round picks to snag an offensive mastermind like McVay or Shanahan who can, wait for it, develop quarterbacks and squeeze the most out of young talent. So, which is it? Do you want a drill sergeant or a quarterback guru? One analyst said he'd give up a first-rounder for McVay. Another said he'd surrender the Jaguars pick, which the Browns own, for either McVay or Shanahan, but not for Mike McDaniel because McDaniel isn't elite enough. Then they started comparing it to the John Gruden trade. Remember that? The Buccaneers gave up 2 first-round picks to pry Gruden from the Raiders in 2002, and he immediately delivered them a Super Bowl. One of the analysts was actually in Tampa when it went down, and he broke down the entire thought process. He said the Bucs had Tony Dungy, who everybody loved. Great guy, great coach, great leader, but they couldn't break through. They kept falling short in the NFC Championship, despite fielding one of the greatest defenses ever assembled. So ownership made a gutsy move. Trade picks for the one coach they believed would tip the scales. And it worked. Gruden walked in, worked those players harder than they'd ever been pushed, flipped the entire culture, and won the Super Bowl in year 1. The analyst used that story to justify giving up picks for an elite coach. He said, if that's all we're missing, go get your guy and it's worth it. McDaniel's mixed bag. Good offense and creative offensive mind, but it's a catch-22 because I keep circling back to the Dolphins, and it's tough to picture him in another spot doing better than he did there. But the offense I like better talent. Yeah, he's had better talent, but I mean he's had to wrangle a lot of big personalities down there. I think Tua was kind of exposed at the end as being maybe more selfish than I thought he was. And you had Tyreek Hill, that's tough to manage too. But then he immediately flipped and said, the reason this is a ridiculous conversation for the Browns is it's not like that's all we're missing. The Bucs only needed a coach. The Browns need everything, including, and this is the part they won't admit out loud, a different quarterback. The game being played, this is the game unfolding behind the curtain. The Browns are interviewing coaches and asking them, can you win with Shadur Sanders? And some of these coaches are watching the tape, sizing up the situation, looking at all the noise and media attention and family dynamics, and they're saying, no thanks, I'll hold out for something better. And here's where it gets even crazier. The NFL is a fraternity. It's a tight-knit circle of coaches, executives, and power players who all stay connected. When word spreads that certain coaches are declining the Browns specifically because of Shedeur, that builds a narrative. It creates a reputation. And in the NFL, reputation is everything. So now you've got this situation where coaches who turn down the Browns' job, coaches who say they won't work with Shedeur, might find themselves pushed to the fringes of the coaching fraternity. Not officially blacklisted, but quietly sidelined from certain opportunities because they showed they're not willing to tackle challenging situations. Think about it. If you're an owner hunting for a head coach and you hear that a candidate rejected the Browns because he didn't want to develop a young quarterback, what does that signal? It tells you that coach only wants cushy situations, that he only wants established veteran quarterbacks, that he's not willing to build something from scratch. And in today's NFL, where quarterback development is literally the most critical skill a head coach can possess, being known as the guy who refused to develop Shadur Sanders could torpedo your career. The other side of the coin. But hold on, because there's another angle to this story that nobody's discussing. Brian Flores, meanwhile, has done an incredible job as defensive coordinator, and it's obvious the man had the guts to take on the NFL. How many coaches have the guts to challenge the NFL? He risked his entire career. I agree with you. It was brave, but some said it wasn't smart. Well, you could argue that there's a difference between bravery and, there's a game. We talk about it all the time, the unwritten rules. What if, hear me out, what if the coaches who are saying no to Cleveland aren't the smart ones? What if they're the ones who lack the vision to see what Shedeur could become with the right development? The facts about Shedeur. Let's talk straight facts for a second. Shadur Sanders just had his first NFL start. The team won. He made throws that Deshaun Watson hasn't made in 2 years. He showed mobility, awareness, and composure in the pocket. Yeah, there were mistakes. He's a rookie, but the flashes were undeniable. And yet some of these coaching candidates are watching that tape and saying, nah, I don't want any part of that. You know what that tells me? It tells me those coaches are scared. They're scared of the challenge. They're scared of the media attention. They're scared of having to field questions about Deion Sanders and NIL deals and all the noise that has absolutely nothing to do with winning football games. The analyst kept saying the Browns need a leader of men. Well, a real leader doesn't run from challenges. A real leader doesn't say, I only want to coach the easy guys. A real leader looks at Shadur Sanders and says, that kid has talent and I'm the one who can unlock it. Brian Flores might be tough, he might be a hard ass, but you know what else he is? He's someone who sued the entire NFL and risked everything for his principles. So if Flores looks at the Browns' job and says yes, despite all the complications with Shedeur, that would actually be the most Brian Flores move possible, taking on a challenge everyone else is scared of. Mike McDaniel might be similar to Stefanski personality-wise, but you know what? McDaniel took Tua Tagovailoa, a quarterback everyone had written off as a bust, and turned him into an MVP candidate for 2 years. Yeah, it fell apart this year, but for a while there, McDaniel had people believing Tua was elite. If McDaniel can do that with Tua, imagine what he could do with a quarterback who actually has arm talent like Shedeur, the leadership vacuum. The thing is, guys, the Browns don't have players who can lead in that locker room. They just don't. I don't think, Myles Garrett is our best player by far, but he's not the leader. He's not the leader. No, doesn't make him a bad guy, doesn't make him bad at anything, just not his personality. They need to find, especially at quarterback. Let me ask you this. If you don't believe there's that alpha who can lead like a Ray Lewis type, and we clearly don't have that on the roster, isn't it more crucial that you go find that leader of men? The real irony. But instead of zeroing in on potential and possibility, we're hearing about coaches who want nothing to do with it. Coaches who are letting perception and narrative steer their decision-making instead of actually evaluating talent. And here's the beautiful irony in all of this. These analysts spend half the show talking about how modern players are too coddled and soft. But what are these coaches doing? They're being soft. They're being coddled by the safety of only taking jobs in perfect situations. You want to talk about having guts? You want to talk about being a hard ass? Then step up and take the Browns job with Shadur Sanders and prove you can develop a young quarterback despite all the noise. Because here's the reality nobody wants to admit. Shadur Sanders is talented enough to be an NFL starting quarterback. The question isn't whether he can play. The question is whether there's a coach brave enough to actually develop him without using all the outside noise as an excuse when things get rough. The Gruden Blueprint. The John Gruden story is perfect for this moment. The Bucs needed a culture overhaul. They needed someone who would demand excellence and wouldn't tolerate excuses. Gruden walked in and did exactly that, and they won immediately. The Browns need the same thing. They need someone who will walk in and say, I don't care about the media circus. I don't care about Deion Sanders. I don't care about any of that. I care about developing Shadur Sanders into a franchise quarterback, and I'm willing to stake my reputation on making it happen. That's the coach Cleveland needs. Not someone running from the challenge. Not someone making excuses before they even start. Not someone who's so worried about perception that they'd rather turn down millions of dollars than work with a talented young quarterback. Trust and understanding. I don't know. I just feel like you have to understand me more as a person than you'll really understand my style. It's not a lack of fight there. It's just understanding because who you are bleeds into how you play. Is that what you mean? I'm a person who trusts. If we trust each other, I'll be able to give you my best. If I don't trust you, then it's going to be hard to give you the best. That's just human nature. Yeah, so that's what it all boils down to. When you understand me as a person, then you'll be able to understand how the playing style works. The real story. You know what the real story is here? It's not about coaches being banned or blacklisted. It's about coaches self-selecting out of opportunities because they lack the confidence to handle complex situations. And in a league where every team has drama, every team has difficult personalities, every team has challenges, being the coach who runs from those challenges isn't a good look. The analyst kept asking, what would you give up for an elite coach? One said he'd give up a first-rounder for Sean McVay. Another said he'd surrender the Jaguars' late first-rounder for McVay or Shanahan. But here's my question. What's more valuable? Trading picks for a proven coach who might not want to be there, or finding a hungry coach who sees Shadur Sanders as an opportunity, not a problem? Because I guarantee you there are coaches out there right now who are watching Shadur's tape and getting fired up. Coaches who see the arm talent, the mobility, the football IQ, and think, I could work with that. I could develop that into something special. Those are the coaches Cleveland should be targeting, not the ones who need to be convinced, not the ones who are hesitant because of media narratives, but the ones who are chomping at the bit to prove they can develop a quarterback everyone else is scared to touch. the challenge question. The analysts said players want to be coached hard. They said players want to be pushed to reach their peak. Well, coaches should want the same thing. Coaches should want to be challenged. They should want to prove they can succeed in difficult situations. And if they don't, if they're turning down opportunities because the situation isn't perfect, then maybe they're not the elite coaches we thought they were. So here's my question for you. When you see coaching candidates turning down the Browns job specifically because of Shadur Sanders, does that make you think less of Shedeur, or does it make you think less of those coaches? Because from where I'm sitting, any coach who looks at a talented 22-year-old quarterback and runs away because of noise and baggage isn't tough enough for this league anyway. And maybe, just maybe, Shedeur dodging those coaches is the best thing that could happen to him. If you want to stay ahead of all the behind-the-scenes drama in the NFL coaching carousel and find out which coaches are really stepping up versus which ones are running scared, hit that subscribe button right now. We're bringing you the stories the mainstream media won't tell you. Drop a comment and let me know. Would you rather have a coach who embraces the Shadur challenge or one who needs a perfect situation to succeed? Let's talk about it.